PhD, public policy administration with a concentration in criminal justice. Just for those that don't know me, what I do, I take forensic investigation and I turn it on biological evolution and abiogenesis. I'm looking at it from outside the field because I believe they're siloed and they've been captured and they can't see around the corner where they're wrong. And it is forbidden for them, if you're going to be within the system, to speak against the system. So I'm outside looking in. One question came up. It is, why is the idea that evolution is a linear progression from simple to complex so common? And what's the real story? So let's take a look at it. And in my rebuttal, I said the statement sounds careful, but it quietly assumes settled what is actually the central claim under dispute. That all biological complexity originated from non-living chemistry and then rose through a single historical tree by natural processes alone. Once that assumption is granted, and that is what they need, they're, the atheists, the agnostics, they have to make assumptions that are false to move forward in their beliefs. And they have captured the Western world, if not the world itself, in these lies. But I'm sure there's areas that don't follow after their false narrative, but it is taught in daily in Western society to children, and it leads to decay that we see in our nations now. Once that assumption is granted, the rest of the narrative becomes internally consistent. But internally consistent is not the same thing as demonstrated causation. So they accept the narrative, but that does not demonstrate the causation of a non living substance becoming a living substance. You just have to believe it. The first weakness is that the simple to complex story is not derived from direct observation, but from a reconstruction laid on top of present day organisms and molecular similarities. No one has ever observed non living chemistry crossing the boundary into a self replicating information bearing system, nor observed a naturally evolving lineage invent a new cellular architecture. Those steps are inferred, not measured. When the statement says organisms formed first from non living chemicals and then had to build on that, it treats a hypothetical origin mechanism as an established historical fact, even though the origin of life remains experimentally unclosed and mathematically blocked by unresolved information and replication fidelity constraints. That makes the entire slow buildup of complexity chain rest on a unverified starting premise. Second, the argument confuses descriptive ordering with causal demonstration. It is true that simpler organisms appear in deeper fossil layers and more complex organisms in later layers. But ordering does not identify mechanism. A temporal sequence also cannot tell you whether complexity was generated by natural mutation and selection, by guided processes, by front loaded information, or by separate origin events. The statement implicitly assumes that appearing later equals built by earlier forms, but that inference is not encoded in the fossil themselves. It is an interpretive overlay. I want to make that clear. Third, the examples of simplification in parasites do not rescue the main claim. Losing genes and structure is chemically easy. Building new integrated biological machines is not. The fact that systems can decay, streamline, or outsource functions does not demonstrate that unguided processes can invent new cellular architectures, new metabolic networks, or new genetic coding systems. Reduction is not evidence of construction. Yet the argument treats simplification as if it confirms that the same mechanism that supposedly built complexity in the first place. Fourth, the model treats complexity as a single scalar quantity, when in reality, biological systems are modular and trade off driven. Losing one module can increase fitness while decreasing structural richness. But that says nothing about how modules are created. Without showing experimentally repeatable mechanisms that generate new functions, modules, the narrative remains descriptive rather than explanatory. Fifth, the story relies heavily on reconstruction in a more molecular similarity, but similarity alone cannot distinguish between common descent and common design, front-loaded information, or constrained solution spaces. The genetic data are real, but the historical meaning assigned to them is model dependent. The statement presents one model's interpretation as if it were the data themselves. In short, the idea that life slowly built complexity upward from chemistry is not a demonstrated causal mechanism. It is a coherent historical narrative led onto patterns of similarity, fossil ordering, and known biological degradation processes. It explains how things could be arranged in a timeline, but it does not experimentally demonstrate how non-life became life or how fundamentally new biological systems were generated. Until those causal steps are shown in testable, repeatable form, the simple to complex story remains an interpretive framework, not a complex scientific explanation. All right, thanks for joining. God bless, and I hope to hear from you.